All right, so here we are in Pablo, Georgia. We're staying in this awesome little cabin, and I was reading Ecclesiastes 3. Talks about a time for everything, and I have this really cool Founder's Bible that has a lot of stories that go back to the founding of our country, and um, there's this one story in particular I thought it would be cool to share with you guys. It's called A Time to Fight. And even though this story was based in the 1776 time, I think it's very relevant to today. So my hope is that this inspires at least one or two of you. I know it inspired me. It's called The Time to Fight, based on Ecclesiastes 3. There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven, a time for war and a time for peace. In the 1770s, a Reverend John Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg pastored two churches in Woodstock, Virginia. One was an English-speaking Episcopal church and the other a German-speaking Lutheran church. He was also a member of the Virginia legislature. In January 1776, he was attending the legislative session in Williamsburg, and war with Great Britain was looming on the horizon. Boston had been blockaded by the British Navy, Charlestown burned, Lexington and Concord attacked, public stores of gunpowder seized in Virginia, and the Battle of Bunker Hill fought. He returned home from the state capital to his churches, and on January 21st, 1776, stood in his pulpit and delivered what was to become his farewell sermon. He recounted the crisis then facing America, reminding them how America had been founded in pursuit of religious and civil liberties, and that they were now in danger of losing those liberties. He concluded with these words: "In the language of the Holy Writ, there is a time for all things," Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8. "A time to preach and a time to pray, but those times have passed away." Then in a loud voice he pointed to verse 8, declaring, "There is a time to fight, and that time has now come." He then bowed his head and offered a dismissal prayer, but instead of following his usual custom of going off to the vestry room after his sermon, he began to disrobe in front of his congregation. When he finally shed his clerical robes, he stood before them in the full uniform of a military officer. He descended the pulpit, weapons in hand, and marched to the back of the church, reminding his parishioners that if they did not get involved and protect their liberties, they would have no liberties left to protect. Outside the church, Pastor Muhlenberg ordered drummers to beat for recruits. Some 300 men from his two congregations joined him that day, becoming the 8th Virginia Regiment. Muhlenberg went on to become one of America's highest-ranking military officers, finishing the Revolution as a Major General, one of only 19 officers in the Continental Army to achieve that rank. He participated in the major battles at Brandywine, Germantown, Monmouth, Stony Point, and Yorktown, and if you tour Valley Forge today, you can still see the Muhlenberg Barracks. The small cabins built by his parishioners, it's pretty cool, in their attempt to survive that brutal winter. In the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, Pastor Muhlenberg appears on horseback alongside George Washington and his other generals in the massive painting of the surrender of the British at Yorktown. He is also one of a select group of individuals who has been honored with an individual statue of the U.S. at the U.S. Capitol. Peter had a brother who was also a minister, the Reverend Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, pastor of a church in New York City. Frederick was critical of his brother's involvement and strongly opposed what Peter had done, telling him, You would have acted for the best if you had kept out of this business from the beginning. I now give you my thoughts in brief. I think you are wrong in trying to be both soldier and preacher together." However, Peter replied with some strong thoughts of his own. "I am a clergyman, it is true, but I am a member of society as well as the poorest layman, and my liberty is as dear to me as to any man." I don't know if he had that proper accent, but I'm giving it to him anyway. "Shall I then sit still? Heaven forbid it. I am called by my country in its defense. The cause is just and noble, and so far I am from thinking that I am wrong. And so far I am from thinking that I act wrong. I am convinced it is my duty so to do, and duty I owe to God and my country." Peter understood that if he did not get involved, he could not protect what was important to him. Frederick, however, was unconvinced. But in 1777, the British arrived in New York City. Of the 19 churches in the city, they burned 10 to the ground. They also drove Frederick from his own church and desecrated the building. And usually when you hear desecrated, that means they went to the bathroom all over it and who knows what else. Frederick thus found himself rethinking his position, and like his brother, he too decided to get involved. He became a significant political leader in Pennsylvania and then was elected the first Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, where he was instrumental in framing the Bill of Rights. In fact, his signature is one of only 2 that appears on that document. A large painting of him hangs in the Speaker's lobby of the U.S. House in honor of his role as America's first Speaker. The 2 pastor brothers were instrumental in helping America secure both its civil and religious liberties, understanding that there is indeed a time to fight. So, I share that story with you, not to incite violence, not to say go grab your ARs and your bayonets, but to just wake up and see what's going on in this country, and the leadership at the top that is basically doing everything they can to line their own pockets and do everything they can to steal from us, the laymen. And it's only going to get worse unless we stand up and do something about it. Again, I'm not calling for violence, but I am calling for people to do something. And whatever that looks like, maybe whatever talents you have, whatever kind of platform you may have, to speak up and put some of those talents to use. And let's get America back to the way it used to be.